Welcome to Day Zero research segment of the AppDev Done Right Summit, where the groundwork for successful application delivery begins. Before writing the first line of code or strategic decisions around architectures, platforms, design patterns, and trajectory for speed, scale, and security really has to take it into consideration. So in this session, we're here to talk about how we'll focus on the intentional design, selecting the right cloud-native architectures, choosing platforms for accelerating developer productivity, and aligning technology strategy for really that aligns to the business outcomes. So when we're talking about things like Kubernetes to serverless, from the IDP for the, or looking at decisions that are made around defining not just how applications are built, but how they're going to evolve, operate, and deliver value for the long term. My name is Paul Nashawaty, and I'm the practice lead and principal analyst for the AppDev practice at TheCUBE Research, and I'm joined today by Savannah. Savannah, great to have you on. I'm really excited to have you here to have a conversation with me about Day Zero. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Paul. It is such a joy to be able to join you for this conversation today, and congratulations on your successful summit. As you mentioned, I'm Savannah Peterson, our principal analyst in consumer edge and devices here at theCUBE, and often your co-host and co-analyst for these types of dialogues. Now, I am really pumped about this conversation because this is one of our biggest overlaps. We're going to be talking a lot about the tools that developers are using. We're going to be talking about IDPs, GitOps, low code, no code, and I just can't wait. You always impress me with the amount of data you curate. So this is going to be an awesome conversation.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome. I really appreciate it. I mean, a lot of fresh research has kind of just come out of the field. We're really excited about the data here, and we're really like this topic is really set to frame that discussion are really around that Day Zero, right? It's important for the audience to understand and explore how these early stage decisions shape the success of application development initiatives, right? When we look at topics like architecture and planning or platform selection or cloud native design foundations, it's often overlooked. A lot of things like, they kind of move towards that, hey, we have to deliver, right? And as organizations rush to software delivery faster, we have to understand how technology and the teams align to the technical choices along with the long-term business values, as well as developer experience and operational scalability. So Savannah, let's dive right in. When we look at parts of the the Day Zero perspective, right? We're looking at it in the context of GitOps, right? And let's start with there, right? So GitOps is really becoming a central, environment for managing infrastructure applications, as well as how organizations are using GitOps to improve deployment velocity. They're using consistency and compliance across the environment. So I really want to kind of just share a couple of stats here, right, Savannah? So 69% of organizations implement GitOps to report and improve development frequency and reliability. This is coming from our recent research that we see in the field. It's really great to see this information because it's not just anecdotal information of, hey, I want to use it. It's actually showing what organizations are doing. We're seeing 84% of DevOps teams are using GitOps to improve deeper developer productivity, as well as resource to reduce those rollbacks and complexity. And we're also seeing how GitOps adoption is growing with a CAGR of 30%, fueled by demand scalability, declarative infrastructure automation, as well as a number of other things like compliance, regulations, and scalability. So, Savannah, when we look at this, what does this mean? What does this even mean to like the environment, the ecosystem, and organizations trying to develop?
Well, this means a couple of things. One, first of all, awesome stats there, Paul. Really, really interesting. One of the conversations that we've had a number of KubeCons in recent history is DevOps dead? Well, clearly, if we're looking at DevOps teams still acting ferociously and based on this data, it's obviously not dead. And when we're thinking about the role of GitOps in that, frankly, it's Day Zero for most companies in terms of at-scale AI deployment. So if you're not building these strong foundations, GitOps obviously being critical in your ability to scale and be agile about the tools that you're using, you're going to find yourself in a pretty prickly position here pretty fast. So I think what I'm hearing from this data and what it's reaffirming for me is both the velocity that teams want to be growing at, and also the way that they're aware that there's going to be some new tools and code and methods for building that might not even exist yet that are going to be a part of this new future tech stack.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we always have to be thinking about the future, right? When I talk about the app dev, practice, right? I talk about past, present, and future, right? And when we're talking about these modernization approaches, we have to look at it in today's sense of where organizations are with their applications in today's environment. But that's typically viewed as, I hate to say it, but heritage, right? It's old, right? And those
And I
organizations.
always love how you say heritage instead of legacy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to call anything, that people are
Yeah, yeah.
using not effective, but it is. I
Great
mean, and
point.
people have
Great.
to move. They absolutely have to move forward, right? And
Mhm.
like bring it to today's current states. You mentioned Kubernetes. I mean, when we're at KubeCon, we're walking the floor. That's what people are talking about, right? It's like, how do you do containerization? How do you do orchestration? And then we have to look at the things that you were talking about, which is the next generation. What's happening next? I was talking about in a previous session, I was talking about WebAssembly and WASM and where that's going. And I think that's pretty exciting stuff. But let's pivot a little bit here for the research, talking about the internal development platform, so the IDPs, right? As we look at the IDP as it gains traction, I think what I really want to understand here, Savannah, is what are you hearing from organizations and from customers that you talk to about how teams are balancing abstraction with flexibility to really improve their developer productivity and without limiting that innovation, right? In our research,
Yeah.
we see that, we see a lot of organizations that they're still spending a third of their time, only a third of their time, doing development, right? And the rest of the time doing maintenance. And
Yeah,
so what do you think?
27%. It's not even a third of their time writing code, which is always one of the more shocking statistics to me. I think this is a really great question, Paul. And I'm excited for us to banter about this one in particular a little bit, because one of the hot conversations that we've been having across the competitors in the ecosystem space is the emphasis on the ecosystem. And when I think about an IDP, they want that optionality. They want the ability to be able to build in whatever tools they want into their seamless experience for those developers. And it's the conversations that we're having that I know the large hyperscalers are already doing internally at scale, that they're also partnering with each other in ways that we haven't seen before for that interoperability that the developers are craving. And because the reality is, as much as there are some front runners in a very interesting race here right now, we don't know exactly what the ecosystem of the future is going to look like and what those final tools will be. We do know, however, that if you provide an awesome unified development environment and a platform that allows the developers to use the best tools for the greatest results and value achieved for the company, you've got people who are happier, living more purposeful work, and hopefully doubling down on that creative time or that ability to build and bumping up that stat from that 27% that we see. So I think there's a real craving for it. I'd be curious to see what types of, have there been any solutions you've seen or conversations you've had where you really felt like somebody was doing this right?
Yeah, absolutely, Savannah. This is so you're spot on. I think I want to touch on a little bit, developer satisfaction is, I think that's incredibly important for organizations to address because, when we talk to these C-level of CIOs and boards of companies that are trying to modernize, they ask about, modernization. The two things that they run into for application modernization, two main barriers is complexity and skill gap issues, right? And if you're not making your developers happy, then you're going to lose them, right? So you
Yeah.
want to make sure you have a good area. But you asked a question, a great question. Who's doing it well, right? And who's out there? Well, there's a lot of desire for organizations to streamline that developer onboarding and reduce that time to value, right? And what we actually see in our data is 70% of enterprises are looking to build and plan to use an IDP to help do just that. So they're looking for solutions in the market to do that. IDPs also, they do, those organizations that kind of provide it, they reduce that time spent on infrastructure tasks up to 50%, enabling faster iteration, fewer blockers, so that innovation can really occur. And, and we also see that companies with mature IDP reports up to 40% improvement over developer lead time and overall software development performance. And this overall, Savannah, is really kind of the key to when we start looking at what is happening in the future state. There's so many applications being created, right? And what it kind of goes to the next part of our discussion here, which is the developers, the professional developers cannot be responsible for developing all the applications, right?
No.
They have to do other things, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's not apps require more than just apps to work. I mean, you got to have an architecture. There's a lot of layers to that onion, and I think that that stat you just said there at the close, I think is really compelling because you and I are both having oodles of conversations about artificial intelligence and the productivity gains that companies are realizing early on. 40% increase in deployment lead time and that time to value is remarkable. And that's not necessarily through automation or AI in this case with an IDP. This is literally just unifying this experience, to your point, and making this smooth and intuitive, and well, as intuitive as it can be in certain cases. And I think that developers are builders, they're creatives, they're technical creatives. They want to sink their teeth into doing stuff. And then they also want to be able to spend strategic time brainstorming what those future applications are going to do, or how these applications could best interact with each other to provide even greater value for their respective communities. So I think what we're going to see here is potentially a new creative class that is able to do things not just bigger or more remarkable, but significantly faster than we've been able to do historically. And you and I both know the developer community loves that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love the fact that you brought AI into the conversation because I was going to kind of get us there, but I definitely think it's important. Where you brought it in makes a lot of sense. But here's why I think it makes a lot of sense. We know that there's a tremendous amount of development effort. And when we say development effort for applications, it's not just that professional developer. We're seeing development occurring in the citizen developer role. Like the lines of businesses are starting to use and develop. So that means like everyone in their respective functions have some element of creating applications. Enter the kind of the term low code, no code, right? I mean, we start kind of using this way of dragging and dropping and doing things to kind of make sure, have a WYSIWYG kind of editor that allows you to kind of do what you need to do, right? But like with the rise of no code and low code platforms, how are organizations really kind of looking at this from a tool perspective to broaden the development strategy without compromising security, governance, and security? That's a big question here, right? Because governance, especially with AI, allows for a lot going on. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because none of this exciting, we can build things, do things faster, easier, more creatively stuff matters if there's not the right governance. And I think that it's been refreshing for me at the last few shows that we've been at, where the conversation has really taken center stage. When we were at Booming, you and I were talking about governance a lot. We were talking about governance at Google and at Dell recently, even at ServiceNow. And I think we have to be mindful of the way that these applications are going to be used at scale and what they're going to be doing when we're not necessarily in the loop in the same way that we historically have been. And so I think it's important that the customers on the other side of these apps, the end users of these apps, have the trust in their data privacy and that security, and just in the utility of that and how it's being leveraged within the organization's value chain. So I think it's exciting. And I think it's funny because I've been joking in general that nerds are kind of having a moment, that nerds are kind of sexy right now in a way that we haven't been in a long time. And I think the same thing about governance and about privacy. And I think it's really critical. I suspect you've probably had a lot of conversations. Would you say that the conversation rate around governance is higher, lower, or comparable to how much you've spoken about it historically?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a lot higher now. And it's exactly to your point. There's so much emphasis on putting the responsibility for the development to occur outside the fringes of the developer, the production.
Totally. Great
Yeah,
point.
so it's happening outside. So
Mhm.
you need to have those balances in place, the checks and balances, the governance, regulations, and compliance. Hey, we're seeing that like in our research that global no code and low code platforms is expected to reach $65 billion by 2027. And we're seeing that 65% of application development in enterprises will be done using low code and no code by 2026. That's a big lift for no code and low code, right?
Wow.
And we also see that
Yeah.
companies are reporting 5 times faster application development using low code, no code. So without those governance and guardrails in place, that's a problem.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, okay, so those stats are kind of wild because they're a little bit in conflict, or I guess not, oh, done using as in built using. Sorry, I totally misinterpreted what you just said there. Scratch that, never mind. No, so what this is telling me is we're done reinventing the wheel, and that it's not going to be about proprietary tires. It's going to be about having the best car or the fastest rocket ship or whatever that's going to be. And I actually find this technological revolution very refreshing, in the sense that we did not need to be in our silos as a community of technologists, as builders, as creatives, doing the same thing and hoping we were doing it at the same time. No, let's get the axle on that car. Let's put those wheels on. And then, hey, you build a Porsche engine, you're going to go build a Ferrari, and we'll see you on the track. But it makes a lot more sense to be able to hit the ground running, and also know that that chassis and that frame of that car is street legal, is going to be safe, and has passed those safety checks or whatever that might be, so that you can build whatever it is that is experimental in a way that is secure enough to at least get into a testing environment without jeopardizing your data, frankly. I really went for the car analogy there, didn't I? I wasn't expecting that one. Here we are, baby.
I love car analogies. I'm a car guy, so I really, totally love car analogies. But look, I think what you're hitting on is it would be remiss for us not to talk about open source, because open source kind of plays into everything you're talking about. So you have to have those governance, those rules and regulations, but you also want to have a technology stack that's been tested and tried and true in the market. We see that 96% of organizations are using open source and mission critical workloads. We see that open source tooling reduces the total cost of ownership by up to 30% because it's been tested. And this is for DevOps and cloud native environments. We also see that 87% of IT leaders are using open source to help improve innovation, enabling faster experimental and trying those cutting edge technology. So Savannah, in our final section here, I really want to kind of get into, like, how do you see in your conversations how open source adoption with the technologies, how does it contribute to innovation, cost effectiveness, and flexibility within these organizations we're talking across within the organizations that we're talking to across their software development lifecycle?
I'm really grateful we get to talk about this today, Paul, because it feels a little bit, and as they always say, everything old is new again, or like the 80s are back in and hit, but I feel like we're having a bit of a renaissance when it comes to the open source community. It feels like the early days, but this time with a ton of momentum and a lot of enterprise backing. I mean, I've really been enjoying the different executives who are dropping open source code in their keynotes at shows, or making things available in a way that we just haven't seen. I think the velocity of the open source community is unparalleled right now. I think that even having one of the most prominent companies in AI have the word open in their branding, there is a real celebration of open right now. And I think it's great, because you and I have been in the space for a long time, but for those maybe just getting into it or just starting to build applications in this space, there are so many tools and cookbooks and formulas that you can follow to get off the ground, or to get that car onto the track to get started right now. And the community itself, I mean, this is the one thing that just consistently blows me away. There is not a more welcoming or helpful community than the open source community. And when you think of open and welcoming, the first thing that comes to mind isn't always enterprise tech behemoths, but the reality is there's a lot of contributions from many, many, many of the big companies that are creating complementary toolkits with even some of their competitive hyperscalers that are affording the opportunity for us to make sure that this governance, this compliance, these regulations don't slow down the entire industry, or that there isn't some crazy breach or a reason for legislation even at a federal level on some of this stuff. So I genuinely think that open source provides the social proof in projects and demand, because people are curious and using that code, and you're able to see that. But I think it also shows the commitment of the community to build transparently right now and to learn transparently. And I think it's a really lovely moment to be a member of the open source community. And it's great to see these larger companies contribute in the incredible capacity they are, and to even, low-key flex when they talk about how much they've been able to contribute to some of these open source endeavors. What about for you? I mean, I feel like you and I are probably having similar conversations about this.
Yeah, for sure. It's absolutely the time is really exciting to be in open source, because now you can kind of, try and do things and build in ways that, we just haven't been able to innovate the way we've been doing this, in the past. I look at some of the heritage ways of kind of getting here, and I was watching recently an episode of, I don't know if you ever seen this show, but Halt and Catch Fire, and it was built about the 80s, and it's really, really kind of cool about like seeing how, technology was taking off back then, but it was so, so, so different than it is today. And it's just refreshing to have the innovation and everything in here. But Savannah, I could talk to you all day about this. This is awesome. Really appreciate your insights and your perspective. I know you bring a lot to the table with this. It's awesome to have you on the session talking about day zero. I want to thank you for your time today. It was awesome. And I want to thank the audience for joining us for this insightful session. We really see the impacts on day zero and the key drivers to help accelerate the release cycles while maintaining stability and efficiency. It's really a big part of the day zero part of the AppDev Done Right Summit here. But as we wrap up this session, be sure to tune into some of these other sessions that we have in the series. There's a lot here across day zero, day one, day two, and DevSecOps, and anything that touches the CI/CD pipeline across the SDLC. So remember that embracing architecture planning, platform selection, and cloud-native design strategies, it's really key to application modernization success. Thank you for your time today, and have a great day.